Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. And this month, we are honoring National Poetry Month by having poets from different backgrounds. Today we are honoring Hiba Dagher, who writes about her Arab American community. Hiba is an undergraduate student at the University of Michigan, pursuing a degree in English and Ethics Studies. She is the founder of Hikayat, an organization that celebrates artists, writers, and creatives from the MENA region and its diaspora. She is the recipient of 2 Hopwood Awards, and her work has been featured in the Shurak Writing Showcase, Exiled, Literary Magazine, Cafe, and the Inside Out Anthology. Welcome, Hiba.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's really an honor.
You're joining us, and we got to speak a little bit before we're starting to record now, and I was learning a little bit about your background. So tell us, how are you connected to the Arab American background?
Yeah, of course. So my parents are Lebanese immigrants, and my father came around the 80s and 90s, and my mom came towards the tail end of the 90s. And I was born in Dearborn, Michigan. I was raised here in East Dearborn, which has the largest concentration of Arab Americans in a 5-mile radius. So this is where me and my 2 sisters and like my big extended Lebanese family was all here. So I've always been very connected to the culture, and I just think being raised in Dearborn specifically, which you know is so insular and so like it's almost sometimes it feels like it's its own country within, or like its own, it really is, it's like its own country within like the greater Dearborn area. It feels I've always felt very connected to my culture and my identity based by being raised here and by growing up here.
Yeah, I have to say that Dearborn does feel like you're visiting an Arab country, where like a lot of the signs are both in Arabic and in English. Plus, there's the Arab American National Museum. That's the
Yeah.
Arab Museum. Is it
Yeah.
the only or the largest Arab American museum in the US?
Yeah.
It's the only, yeah, so that's probably an inspiration as well. It might have been established before you even started into your poetry. And how did you start? Yeah, how did
Uh,
you start into poetry?
I've always loved writing and reading. My family used to, and like my friends and family used to make fun of me because I wouldn't go anywhere without a book. And it wasn't always poetry. I always used to like write little stories and things like that. I'd like get 10 pages into like a big novel idea, and then I'd like stop writing because I didn't know where else I wanted to go. So writing and reading has always been something that's very close to my heart. It's always been like a form of escaping the world I'm currently in by creating one of my own. But poetry wasn't always something I was into. I think because the way that I was taught poetry was very similar to like a lot of students, where it's like once at the year, towards the end of the year, you have like a little section of poetry in your class, and you look at, you have to look at all the devices, and you have to look at the figurative language and all that kind of stuff, which I love. I love that, but it doesn't really get to like the heart of the, or like the soul of reading poetry and like why I love it. And the birds are all singing outside. So I'm sorry for that. But yeah, so I wasn't always very into it, but then I became a teenager and I started I'd get like little fragments in my mind, or like little lines that I wanted to write down, and I'd put them in like little notebooks around my room or in my phone. And I never considered this to be poetry. I always was like, oh, I have this idea, I should write it down, it sounds pretty. But then towards the end of my senior year, my sister, who was working with the Arab Student Union, which is an organization at Fortson High School, which is the high school that I went to, they host an annual poetry slam. And the president at the time, who's a girl named Zainab, who's a really good friend of mine, she asked if I wanted to submit something. And I'd never really written poetry before. But I was like, okay, sure, I'll do it. And I felt kind of bad because I had like a half idea, And like I'd show up to the rehearsals with like barely anything on the paper. But then the night before, I was like, suddenly it hit me and I was like, okay, this is what I need to talk about. This is what I'm feeling. And I ended up writing a poem about my kind of weird relationship with Arabic and like the kind of jilted Arabic that I speak. It's not really, I don't think of myself as fluent, but like I can speak, like there are gaps in my language, I think. So it kind of talked about that and kind of wrapped it in my identity. It was a very like teenage girl poem. It was a very like first poem, but I still read it sometimes and I'm like, yeah, I want to honor that girl's feelings because she did, you know, I was able to, I felt like that was one of the first times where I was able to articulate what I was feeling. And through that, I got to meet this really wonderful poet named Kamalia Youssef and another poet named Malik. And they had a little organization through Inside Out Poetry in Detroit. And once a week, we would meet in a classroom in Fortson's B Hall and we would just talk about poetry and we'd have like a little workshop. And it was through there that I was really introduced to what poetry could do and what poetry has the potential of being. And yeah, that's kind of where I started and I haven't stopped since.
Sorry, I had to unmute. And you know, I don't hear the birds. I wish I was hearing the birds there in the background, but so ideal for a poet to have that kind of atmosphere, right? So I would love if we could hear a couple of your poems for right now, and then we can come back to the interview because I'll ask you questions, I guess, based on that.
Yeah. So this is a poem about a park near my house. And if you're from Dearborn, then you'd know that this is Hemlock Park. This is 13355 Hemlock Street. But here the birds speak in every language and ask gnarled aunties, all silk veils and pastel tracksuits, anointed with rhinestone hieroglyphics, for their best gossip. And half divine light from the street lamps, the color of orange soda dyed with natural flavors, glimmers on puddles of acid rain. The smell of petrichor and fry grease hang thick in the air like smog. Instead of angels, for there aren't any to spare, there are Nescafe colored boys, all curly hair and no halo, all tight white tank tops and neon basketball shorts, all JV wrestling boys, who pummel each other into the center of the baseball diamond, split blood and tooth into home plate. God is everywhere, and where he isn't, we make more room. And then this is one that I wrote after I was a poll worker on election day this year. And this is a poem, and I was working in Dearborn, in East Dearborn, and I wrote about the experience and kind of the voter suppression that I saw. And it was a really harrowing time. It was really wild for me. So I ended up writing this poem. Sitting on a plastic chair at Laurie Middle School's gymnasium while working Election Day 2020 in Dearborn, Michigan. After lying in a hammock at William Duffy's farm in Pine Island, Minnesota by James Wright. Above me, the dappled light hits on caramel-colored linoleum like sunlight on pond water. Instead of birdsong, we have the warm whir of a broken tabulator and the precinct manager denying another hajj or ammo a translator. The line inches forwards, curling around the gymnasium like ants on a log, hoping for some kind of liberty or retribution or whatever we're calling it today. To my right, the volunteers, weary, unpaid, and still here despite all that, yawning like big cats in nature documentaries. No one notices. We're far too busy awaiting more ballot applications from the city clerk's office. I have wasted my life. And that's my second one.
Thank you for these lovely poems. You know, as you were reading and then you were describing how your contributions during the elections and things like that, I remembered the first recorded writer in history. Her name is Enhadwana. She's from ancient Iraq. And she would write her poetry to bring peace between the different nations. And that was, so from that time, there was like a purpose behind poetry aside from self-reflection, which is also very important. But there was like, she used that to bring peace and harmony between the different nations. And I was, because I think like when you are, the arts transcend, you know, they transcend gender, ethnicity, they transcend everything. And then you can kind of just see the heart of what's being said.
Yeah.
Even if it's a political poem, it could still touch your heart because it's coming from the heart and it's not necessarily aiming to put a burden of a message or trying to gear you in a certain way. So that was very beautiful. And I'm wondering regarding the organization called Hikayat.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about this and when and why you started this organization?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I love reading, and I wasn't always very good at it. I would always get very nervous, but I'm starting to get a little bit over myself, as it were. So thank you very much. And I do think that poetry has, and writing has, a purpose beyond self-reflection, and that is also kind of why I started Hikayat with a few of my friends. And basically, it came from this realization that Arab Americans and people who come from Middle East and North Africa or Southwest Asia, their representations and like positive representations of these people and the diaspora are just so scarce. There really just isn't like positive representations for people who look like me or who come from the same background as me or who speak the same language. And it just I there's just instead there's just this really big, this huge torrent of just negative information to the point where like there's just complete spread of misinformation. People barely know things about Arab culture. They barely know things about the rich history of art and literature, or even just the fact that like there are living Arab artists today. If people like want to think about like an Arab artist, they think of like Khalil Gibran, who is an incredible Lebanese poet and mystic. And I love his work, but I don't think it's fair to the hundreds and thousands of other Arab artists or Southwest Asian and North African artists for their voices to be silenced, or for them to just not kind of have the recognition that they deserve. And that's kind of why Hikayat was founded. It was just kind of an idea of, we want to create a space where not only can we celebrate and center Arab and Southwest Asian and North African artists and writers and creators, but we also want to have a space that kind of creates the next generation. We want to be able to have workshops and art classes and that kind of thing. We want to be able to teach people about the culture, students who despite the fact that they like might live in like Arab families and that kind of thing, they might not know a lot about culture and they might not know too much about history. So that's kind of why Hikayat was founded. It was just to create a space that we didn't see existed. We wanted to have somewhere where we could, all of my friends are very nerdy and bookish, and we all love reading and writing, but we just wanted to have a space where we could talk about like from our culture and from our perspective and celebrate the voices that we just didn't really see were totally represented. So yeah, that's kind of how it was founded. We have a book club, which is really wonderful. We're actually sending out copies of April's book, which is A Map of Home by Randa Jarrad, which is one of my favorite novels and something that I think every young girl should read. It's just so heartbreakingly honest, and I really adore it. But yeah, we're actually sending those copies of the book out sometime this weekend, and we're going to start having workshops. We have a speaker series where we highlight the work of a living Arab artist. Students mostly are able to talk to them and ask them questions and kind of have this role model for someone that they can look up to, because the thing with like Arabs and Arab Americans is like, or like people from the region, is that like they all want their kids to be like doctors and lawyers and pharmacists. So this is like, okay, those are all excellent, we need those jobs, but you know, there are also artists, and art is art can be like a sustainable career for you, and here's someone who's doing it. It's, you know, so that's kind of the idea behind it.
So how can somebody join your club or your organization? How can they contact you guys?
Yeah. So we have an Instagram, which is kind of where we have a lot of the advertising for our programs and things like that. It's at hi.hikayat, K-A-T, because at Hikayat was taken. I could put it in the chat, I think.
Well, I can, when this is going to be recorded, so we're going to put it on our Facebook post that we're
Oh, yeah.
right now, but we're also, this is recorded and we're going to be uploading it
Okay.
on YouTube, and I can include the link to that.
All right, perfect. So yeah, mostly we have our Instagram, which is how we do a lot of the advertising for our events. And then right now, because of COVID and because, you know, our safety is our first priority, a lot of our events are taking place online. Last week, just last week, we actually had the author Zain Dagher come and talk about his book, 30 Names of Night, all the way from Italy, which was really wonderful. Yeah,
that's what I'm really liking about, I know that there's, you know, we've had to go virtual for most of the part, but at the same time, we've gotten to meet people from all over the world that we wouldn't have had the chance to meet otherwise. And they got to know about us and we get to know about them. And this has forced us to just look at things in different perspective.
yeah,
Um,
it's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, regarding the arts and culture, honestly, like the Lebanese are known in the Middle East. They're pretty much ahead of a lot of the other countries. So as much as you guys might feel like marginalized and stuff, you do have a very strong arts and culture
Yeah.
position in various places, including in film.
Yeah.
So Egypt is very strong, and so is, and Lebanon is known for that as well. Like we were watching like Netflix during the pandemic, and just, you know, I see this wonderful, they have a really great selection of Arab films from different countries. Of course, Lebanon and Egypt are up there, but you know, of course, they're in the foreign film category, so it kind of limits. It's just kind of it's targeting the same audience, which we already get to see these kind of things. It would be great that we can have more Arab American films, more mainstream, so that the opportunity to see a different version of that world than what we're constantly shown, you know, that's really what films and stories do. They give you a different perception, especially for communities that have been just, the focus has been just like violence, wars, religion, violent terrorism, and the over and over, and all seem like it's tied together, right?
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So yeah, so I'm very happy that you're doing this kind of work. And where do you see this? Where do you see Hikayat, or even your personal work 5 years from now?
5 years from now. Well, I'm going to be graduating soon, next year, inshallah. And I don't want that to be the end of Hikayat. I don't want it just to be like something that happens just in my undergraduate years. I think the plan ultimately is to continue having it and continue like expanding it. When we were first creating the organization, I had this dream of having kind of somewhat of a national board, and then students could kind of form their own chapters at their universities or like in their own towns and communities, and they could have their own kind of programming and do their own thing, and then we'd be able to provide them with support. So that's inshallah like something I would really love to have in the next 5 years. And then in regards to like my own personal goals in writing, I I don't know. I really don't know. I think I want to continue writing. I love it, and it would be nice to break into publishing some stuff. I don't really know how to do it. I'm still like very much like a baby in that sense. I'm very unfamiliar with like the route of publishing. But I want to learn. I want to have my work be out in the world. That would be really special to see. But yeah, I'm Wherever the wind takes me, I'll go, kind of thing.
I don't think it's going to be that difficult for you, Hiba, to find your way through the publishing industry and get your work out there. And I do hope that you pursue that because, as you just mentioned, we really need more of these voices out there, I think, in general, but particularly from a woman's perspective. And we would love to hear a few more poems by you, if okay with that. Okay, great.
Yeah. Also, I just remembered this, but when you were talking earlier about how like Egypt and Lebanon have like these very rich artistic traditions, I remember this quote, which is Cairo writes, Beirut publishes, and Baghdad reads. I love that quote, and I just remembered it right now, so I wanted to put that out there. Okay, so these are some more poems. This one is called 35 Millimeters with Two Grandfathers. I didn't meet either of my jiddos, Allah yarhamun, but this is a poem that I wrote for them, wherever they are. Okay. 35 with Two Grandfathers. In Dearborn, the hospital fluorescence soaks everyone in pale gold. The room swells, it doesn't matter. The nurses gave up a long time anyways. Someone starts a half argument. She's all her mother. Look at the cheeks like the swell of the fullest moon, ours. Someone else says no. Look at the nose, small now, but when she's older, it'll look just like her father's. There are 4 good shoes, black and reflecting off the linoleum, 2 shirts, thick with starch and sweat. A pack of Marlboros tossed in the bright blue bin, first gift this new life. Soon there will be birthdays and arguments, and Eid breakfast, and 4 hands lined like paper that hold and prod and pinch and kiss and promise. And then this next one is called Exiled Matriarchies on Normile Street. It's a contrapuntal, so it's kind of written in one side, and then that one side is a poem, and then there's another side that's also like a poem, and then read together also has a different meaning. So I'm going to read this 3 times so to like get the full meaning. It'll be a little tricky, but I'll try. Okay, 1. We were born drunk on nostalgia and mint tea. Underneath a cloud of dark hair, we kiss the curling hookah pipe. Our names are holy. Flowers, prophets, split pomegranates between 2 sisters, laugh over the cosmic destruction, which awaits us beyond this living room. It's all we know. We awoke, hungry and bathed in vinegar. We celebrate our abstinence, gossip about someone's bare-thighed daughter. We mourn the girls we could have been and wait, soak in the grief which made our mothers a mother. We don't mean to romanticize another tragedy, but it's all we know. We were born, we awoke, drunk on nostalgia and mint tea, hungry and bathed in vinegar. Underneath a cloud of dark hair, we celebrate our abstinence. We kiss the curling hookah pipe, gossip about someone's bare-thighed daughter. Our names are holy, flowers, prophets. We mourn the girls we could have been and wait. Split pomegranates between 2 sisters, soak in the grief, laugh over the cosmic destruction which made our mothers a mother, which awaits us beyond this living room. We don't mean to romanticize another tragedy, but it's all we know. And then this last one is a newer poem, which is called Upon Revisiting a Dead Bird. And your wings, so green they appear almost artificial, like a bottle of lime-flavored soda, are splayed out on the concrete curve of sidewalk. It feels wrong for something so lucent to be lying here and not amongst your celestial brethren. I almost missed you the first time, you and your still body no bigger than tulip bulb, and me with my snow globe memory, and the 2 of us amongst dusty slush and trees turned to telephone poles. I almost did not return to you, and for that I am sorry. But I can say what brought me back was the gasping realization we might have shared the same birthday. And perhaps if I had a stronger stomach, I would have buried you proper, tucked your banana-colored wings at your sides, and gently placed you in an excavated tissue box. among shriveled red berries and atop a folded Kleenex. I think you would have liked that. And that's some more poems.
That was all very lovely, but I love that second one where you read different versions.
Thank you.
That was really sweet, especially it almost, I don't know, it felt like as if it's something I would write, given that, have you ever been to the Middle East?
Yeah,
You have, okay. Yeah, it sounded like something that somebody who had actually been there, you have that voice in you, that somebody who's been to the Middle East. And I think that's important because it brings that voice and that flavor and everything into it.
Yeah.
We only have a few minutes left, and I would, no, I guess the last question would just be that you're fairly young and you have accomplished a lot. What advice would you give others trying to do similar things?
Wow. Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you for everything. This has been so wonderful. And that poem was real. The one you're talking about was really hard to write. This is actually like the sixth or seventh draft of it, and I've been writing it since I was 17. So uh, this is the one that I'm finally like a little bit happy with. Um, but it's also very strange to be asked about advice to young people because I feel like I'm still very young and I feel like I'm always asking for advice. But I think something that I would tell to my younger self and to girls, and not necessarily girls, but like kids like me, um, who kind of hunger for words and love to write and read, is just to continue doing so, just to get your hands on everything and read everything and write all the time, right? Whenever you want to, try to make like a daily practice of it, try and read every day, try and write every day. I should follow my own advice. I don't write every day, but just kind of consume writing as you would food, consume like words as you would food and air. Just continuously do it all the time, make it like a daily thing, make it like a habit, like make it so that you can't live unless you're like writing and reading and like you're so like very like happy and full with the words and like the magic of writing and poetry and stuff.
Yes, yes. And this is how you get connected to the magic, is by doing the work, discover the magic into it. Heather, thank you so much. I'm imagining I'm going to be seeing so many like accomplishments from you in the future. And it's really not even about like creating these big accomplishments, but it's just hearing your voice into the world, I think is important. So in whatever way you present it, we're really going to be looking forward to it.
Much, Irene. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This will be recorded and we will post it on our website and different social media. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful talking with you.